I can still see my hands shaking as I stare at the bank statement on my laptop screen. 27 years. That's how long I poured everything into those two kids. My time, my money, my heart, my entire identity as a parent. And now, sitting alone in my living room at 58 years old, I'm reading an email from their lawyer telling me I'm not welcome at Thanksgiving dinner. Not this year. Not any year. The words blur together, but one phrase keeps jumping out. Emotional distress caused by your presence. Emotional distress. From the people I raised from toddlers. From the twins I chose when no one else wanted them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand what came before this moment, what kind of life I built, and why losing it broke me in ways I didn't think were possible. Let me take you back to 1997, the year everything started. I was 31 years old, working as a project manager at a mid-sized tech firm in suburban Minnesota. My marriage to Richard had just dissolved. Not spectacularly, just quietly, the way some relationships die. No affair, no drama, just two people who realized they wanted different things. He wanted to travel. I wanted to build a life that meant something. We split the house proceeds, and I used my half to buy a small 3-bedroom colonial in Edina, a quiet neighborhood with good schools and a backyard big enough for a swing set I didn't yet own. For years, I'd been thinking about adoption. It wasn't a sudden decision. It was something that had grown in me like a second heartbeat, quiet but persistent. I'd always known I wanted to be a mother, and when my marriage ended, I realized there was nothing stopping me anymore. No husband to convince. No one to answer to but myself. I started the process alone. The home visits, the background checks, the stack of paperwork that seemed to multiply every week. My therapist said I was looking for purpose. Maybe I was. But it felt like more than that. It felt like destiny. Then, in the fall of 1997, my adoption caseworker, Patricia, called me on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember I was sitting in my cubicle at work, pretending to review a spreadsheet. "We have a situation," Patricia said, her voice careful. "Twins, 4 years old, brother and sister. They've been in the system for 6 months, and frankly, most families aren't interested in taking both. It complicates things." My heart started racing. "Tell me about them." Their mother had a drug problem, severe. She lost custody after they were found alone in an apartment for 3 days. The father was never in the picture. They're healthy now, we've done a full workup, but they've been through trauma. Ashley and Michael, they're going to need someone patient, someone committed. I didn't hesitate. "When can I meet them?" The first time I saw them was at the county office on a gray November afternoon. They were sitting on a plastic bench in a hallway that smelled like industrial cleaner and broken dreams. Ashley had blonde pigtails and was clutching a stuffed rabbit. Michael had the same blonde hair, cut short, and he was staring at the floor like it held the answers to everything. They looked so small, so lost. "This is Jennifer," Patricia said, gesturing to me. "Jennifer is someone who might be your new mommy." Ashley looked up at me, and I saw it. A flicker of hope mixed with terror. Like she'd learned not to hope, but couldn't quite kill it completely. "Hi guys," I said, sitting down on the bench beside them. "I really want to get to know you both. Would that be okay?" Michael didn't look at me. Ashley reached over and squeezed his hand. "It's okay, Michael," she whispered, though she was only 4 minutes older than him, already protecting him. I felt something shift inside my chest, like a door opening that I didn't even know was locked. The process took another 8 months. There were visits to the office, supervised visits at my house, more paperwork, more background checks, more waiting. But I knew, from that first afternoon on the bench, that this was happening. This was my life now. In July 1998, the adoption was finalized. I took a week off work and we went to the Minnesota Zoo. I bought them matching t-shirts that said, "I'm part of Jennifer's family," in bright blue letters. Michael wore his with pride. Ashley kept touching the words like she couldn't believe they were real. My mom flew in from Denver for the celebration dinner. She hugged me in my kitchen and said, "I'm so proud of you, honey. These kids are lucky to have you." My sister Sarah sent flowers and a card that said, "Welcome to motherhood," with a smiley face drawn in the corner. I'd never felt more complete in my life. The early years were hard, of course. Michael had nightmares. Ashley had separation anxiety so severe that she'd scream if I left the room. There were therapy appointments, behavioral issues at school, sleepless nights when one or both of them would crawl into bed with me, shaking from bad dreams. But I never once thought about giving up. This was my choice. They were my children. Full stop. I decorated their bedroom with dinosaur posters and glow-in-the-dark stars. I made their lunches every morning. Turkey sandwiches cut into triangles, apple slices, chocolate chip cookies I baked on Sundays. I volunteered at their school. I showed up to every soccer game, every school play, every parent-teacher conference. By the time they turned 10, you wouldn't have known they were adopted. They were just my kids. That's all anyone saw. My career took a back seat, which was fine by me. I got promoted to senior manager, which meant better health insurance and a solid 401k, but I stopped trying to climb higher. More money meant less time with them, and I wasn't interested in that trade. Instead, I poured myself into the life we built together. Thanksgiving became our holiday. I'd spend 3 days cooking, making turkey and stuffing and 3 different kinds of pie. The dining room table would be covered with a white tablecloth, and we'd hold hands before eating, and each say what we were grateful for. By the time they were teenagers, Ashley and Michael had become the kind of kids people commented on. They were kind to each other, respectful, good students. Michael made the varsity basketball team as a sophomore. Ashley was in the debate club and won a state competition. I was so proud I cried. "You did good, Mom," Michael said, hugging me in the gymnasium after that competition, using the word mom like it was the most natural thing in the world. And to him, it was. To both of them, it was. My friends would say things like, "You must be so proud," and I'd smile and nod, but honestly, the pride was secondary. The real feeling was something deeper. It was gratitude. It was the bone-deep satisfaction of knowing I'd taken 2 broken children and given them a home. A real home. Not perfect, but real. They both went to the University of Minnesota. Michael studied business. Ashley studied law. I attended their graduations, took pictures, cried happy tears. Richard, my ex-husband, even showed up to Michael's graduation. We were cordial by then. He'd remarried, had a daughter with his new wife. But he pulled me aside and said, "You really did something special with those 2, Jen. You should be proud." I felt like I'd won the lottery and no one was ever going to take my ticket away. Then came 2018, and everything started to feel different. Michael got engaged to a woman named Karen, a corporate lawyer who seemed nice enough at first. They'd been dating for 2 years, and he proposed at a fancy restaurant downtown. The engagement party was at my house. I made catering, decorated the living room, bought expensive champagne. Karen hugged me and called me Mom in that careful way new daughters-in-law do, not quite natural but trying. Ashley got promoted to junior partner at her law firm. She was 27 years old and one of the youngest partners in the firm's history. She bought a condo downtown, a sleek 1-bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows and Italian furniture. She was dating someone named Derek, a surgeon, and they seemed happy together. I was so proud I could barely contain it. Both of them successful, both of them happy, both of them out in the world making their mark. This was exactly what I'd wanted for them. This was the whole point. But something started to shift that I didn't quite notice at first. It was small, subtle. The kind of thing you'd never put a finger on until later, when you're trying to understand how everything fell apart. Michael stopped calling as much. Our weekly Sunday dinners became monthly. When I texted him, the responses got shorter. "Busy at work, Mom. Talk soon." Ashley was the same way. She'd always been closer to me than Michael was, but suddenly she had reasons not to come over. Derek's family was visiting. She had a big case. She wasn't feeling well. I told myself it was normal. Kids grow up. They get busy. They build lives separate from their parents. I was supposed to be happy about that. I was supposed to encourage their independence. So I did. I stepped back. I didn't push. I waited for them to come to me. In the spring of 2019, Michael and Karen had a baby, a girl. They named her Sophia. I flew out to the hospital when Karen went into labor, waited in the waiting room for 6 hours, cried when I held my granddaughter for the first time. She was so small, so perfect. I looked at Michael's face as he watched me hold her, and I saw something in his expression that I couldn't quite read. It looked almost like sadness. "She's beautiful," I whispered. "Yeah," he said, "she is." But something was wrong. I could feel it in the air between us, like a frequency only I could hear. A week later, I called Ashley to tell her about Sophia, to make plans for a family visit. "That's great, Mom," she said, her voice distant. "I'll try to make it work." "Try?" I said. "Ashley, it's your niece, your brother's baby. This is important." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a long one. "I know it is," she finally said. I have a lot going on right now." I didn't push. I told myself not to push. But inside, something was starting to crack. Later that month, I got an email from Karen. Just a few lines, very formal. She was writing to let me know that they'd prefer if I didn't visit unannounced, that I should call first and check their schedule, that they were trying to establish boundaries with family members. Boundaries. That word sat in my stomach like a stone. I called Michael immediately. "Why is Karen sending me emails about boundaries?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "Mom, it's not... Look, Karen just thinks it's important that we have some space. As a new family, it's not personal." "It feels personal, Michael." "I know, but it's what we need right now." I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen, in the house I'd bought with my own money, in the home I'd built for them, and I felt something I'd never felt before. I felt afraid. I didn't realize it then, but that phone call in the spring of 2019 was the first domino, the first small crack in the wall. I didn't know that 5 years later, I'd be sitting alone in this same kitchen, reading words from a lawyer I'd never met, telling me that my children didn't want me in their lives anymore. I didn't know that the people I'd sacrificed everything for would look at me one day and decide I was the villain in their story. But looking back now, I can see where it started. I can trace the exact moment when love turned into something else, when gratitude became resentment, when family became a legal matter. The boundaries became bars after that. I kept calling. Michael would answer sometimes, his voice tight and polite in a way it had never been before. "Hi, Mom. Not a great time." "Mom, Karen and I are dealing with some stuff right now." "Mom, can we talk about this later?" Later never came. Ashley stopped answering altogether. My calls went to voicemail. My texts were left on read for days, then finally answered with a single emoji, a thumbs up, like I was a work email she needed to acknowledge. By the summer of 2020, the pandemic had become an excuse for everyone to pull inward. But I knew it was more than that. It was a cover, a permission slip to disappear. I drove past Michael's house in Eden Prairie one afternoon in July. I wasn't planning to. I just found myself on that street, driving slowly, looking at the brick colonial with the manicured lawn and the swing set in the backyard. Sophia would be old enough for that swing set now. I pulled over and sat in my car for 20 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, staring at windows I couldn't see through. A neighbor came out to get her mail and looked at me like I was casing the place. I drove away. That's when I called my therapist, Dr. Morrison, for the first time in 5 years. I hadn't thought I needed therapy anymore. I had my life figured out. I had my kids. I had purpose. But now, sitting in her office with the soft beige walls and the box of tissues on the side table, I felt something collapse inside me. They're pulling away, I told her. I don't understand why. I gave them everything. Dr. Morrison, a woman in her 60s with gray hair and reading glasses on a chain, didn't write anything down. She just listened. "Tell me about the adoption," she said finally. "What do you mean? I've told you about it. 22 years ago. It was the best decision I ever made." "I know, but tell me again. And this time, tell me about it from their perspective." I stared at her. They were 4. They were grateful. They said so. Michael said I was the best thing that ever happened to them. When did he say that, I thought? When he was maybe 8, 9? And since then? Have they said that recently? "No," I said quietly. "But kids grow up. They become less grateful. That's normal." "Is it?" she asked. "Or do you think maybe they're processing something you haven't considered?" I didn't go back to see Dr. Morrison after that. Her questions felt like accusations. I didn't need to be psychoanalyzed. I needed my children to remember what I'd done for them. So I did something I'm not proud of. In the fall of 2020, I hired a private investigator. I told myself it was just to make sure they were okay, that nothing bad had happened to them. But that was a lie. What I really wanted was to know what they were saying about me, what story they were telling themselves, why they were erasing me. The investigator, a man named Frank who operated out of a strip mall in Bloomington, gave me monthly reports. Michael was working long hours at his firm. Karen was home with Sophia most days. They went to Karen's parents' house for Thanksgiving. They didn't mention me. Ashley was working late at her firm. She and Derek had moved in together. They went to dinner with Derek's family on his birthday. They didn't mention me. It was 1,000 small erasures, documented in a manila folder. I paid Frank $800 a month for 6 months until I finally admitted to myself what I was doing and stopped. But the damage was already done. The suspicion had taken root. If they weren't talking about me, what did that mean? Were they talking about me in a way they didn't want me to know? Were they saying I was a bad mother? Were they telling people I was unstable, unhinged? The thought became a splinter, then an infection. I started checking their social media obsessively. Michael had a LinkedIn profile that mentioned his parents, his adoptive parents, it said, like the word adoptive was a scarlet letter. I read it 40 times. Adoptive parents. Not just parents. Adoptive. The qualifier felt like a knife. Ashley had an Instagram where she posted photos of her and Derek at restaurants, at the lake, at a charity gala. In one photo, she was standing with Derek's mother and his sister. The caption said, "Family." Not my family, just family. Like I wasn't part of that word anymore. By Christmas 2020, I hadn't seen either of them in person in 9 months. I sent gifts anyway. For Michael and Karen and Sophia, a dollhouse I'd spent 3 weeks assembling, a gift card, a letter I rewrote 12 times. For Ashley, a cashmere sweater I'd seen her look at in a catalog, a spa gift certificate, a letter. Both letters said the same thing. "I love you. I'm here whenever you're ready to talk." The gifts were acknowledged. A text from Michael. "Thanks, Mom. Sophia loves the house." A text from Ashley. "Thanks for the sweater. It's nice." That was it. No invitation to visit. No mention of seeing me. I sat alone on Christmas Day in my house with the dinosaur poster still hanging in the bedroom upstairs. The bedroom that hadn't been slept in by either of them in 6 years. And I understood for the first time that I might have lost them. Not to death. Worse. To indifference. By March 2021, I'd lost 15 pounds. I wasn't eating on purpose. I was just forgetting. I'd make coffee in the morning and drink half of it cold at 3 in the afternoon. I'd stand in the kitchen looking at the refrigerator with no idea what I wanted. Food seemed pointless. Everything seemed pointless. I called in sick to work more often. My boss, Robert, started asking if everything was okay at home. Fine, I'd tell him. Just a headache. But it wasn't a headache. It was the feeling of your chest caving in, slowly, day by day, until you're not sure there's anything left in there at all. I had $53,000 in my 401k, enough to retire in 10 years if I was careful. I had a house that was paid off. I had good health insurance. By every metric that mattered to anyone else, I was fine. But I was drowning in a house that suddenly felt too big, too quiet, too full of ghosts. Then, in April, Ashley emailed me. Not a text, an email. The formality of it was its own kind of violence. The subject line said, "Important family matter." My hands were shaking as I opened it. The email was dated 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. It was 3 paragraphs long. "Mom," it started, and I clung to that word, that acknowledgement of who I was to her. After a lot of reflection and conversations with Michael and Derek, I've come to understand that my childhood trauma has had a significant impact on my ability to form healthy relationships. I've been working with a therapist to process some things, and I need to be honest with you. I think a lot of my issues stem from the adoption itself. I don't think I was ever given the space to grieve the loss of my biological mother. And instead of processing that, I've been trying to earn love from you by being the perfect daughter. I'm not blaming you for this, but I think I need some distance to figure out who I am outside of that dynamic. Distance. The word hung there like a sentence. The second paragraph was worse. I've also had some conversations with Michael about his experience, and he's shared some things that have concerned me. He's not ready to talk to you about it directly, but I think you should know that the way you've operated in our lives hasn't always felt like love. Sometimes it's felt like ownership. Like we were a project you completed, not people you parented. Ownership, project, completed. The third paragraph was a knife twist. I'm going to be taking some time away from contact for a while. I hope you can respect that. Michael feels the same way. We both love you, but we need to prioritize our own mental health right now. That was it. No love, Mom. No, I understand this is hard. We need space. We both need space. Even Michael, who hadn't said 2 words to me in 6 months, had apparently been talking to Ashley about my failures as a parent. I read the email 6 times, then 7. Then I closed my laptop and went into the kitchen and made myself a cup of coffee that I didn't drink. I stood at the window looking out at the backyard. The swing set I'd bought in 1998 was still there, faded from sun and rain, and I felt something inside me break so completely that I wasn't sure it could ever be repaired. By September 2021, I hadn't heard from either of them in 5 months. I'd sent one more email to Ashley, asking if we could talk, saying I wanted to understand what Michael had supposedly told her. She didn't respond. I called Michael 3 times. He didn't answer. The 4th time, his voicemail was full. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I hired a lawyer. His name was Thomas Chen, and he worked out of a downtown Minneapolis office with a view of the Mississippi River. I sat across from him in a leather chair with my hands in my lap, and I told him everything. The adoption, the years of sacrifice, the sudden withdrawal, the email from Ashley. I didn't tell him about the private investigator. I didn't tell him about checking their social media obsessively. I just told him the facts, the timeline, the rejection. "What do you want?" Thomas asked me, his pen poised over a yellow legal pad. "I want to know what Michael told Ashley about me," I said. "I want to understand what I did wrong, and I want them to understand that they can't just erase me, that there are legal implications to abandoning a parent who gave up everything for them." Thomas set his pen down slowly. "Jennifer," he said, "you can't force your adult children to have a relationship with you. There's no legal mechanism for that, and frankly, pursuing this could make things worse." "Worse?" I laughed, a sound that didn't belong to me. How could it possibly be worse? But I was about to find out. Thomas was right, of course, but I wasn't listening to Thomas anymore. I was listening to the voice in my head that said I deserved answers, that I deserved to be acknowledged, that 27 years of sacrifice couldn't just be erased without explanation. So I did what any desperate person does. I escalated. In November 2021, I hired a process server to deliver a formal letter to both Michael and Ashley. The letter, drafted by Thomas but written in my voice, asked them to explain the allegations Michael had supposedly made to Ashley. It stated that I was entitled to know what I'd done wrong. It warned them that continued refusal to communicate could be interpreted as intentional infliction of emotional distress. I sent copies to both their work addresses and their homes. The response came 3 days later, also through a lawyer. Her name was Sandra Whitmore, and she represented both Michael and Ashley. The letter was 4 pages long. I read it standing in my kitchen, my coffee growing cold on the counter. The first page outlined their claims, that my parenting had been conditional, that I had leveraged their adoption status to maintain control, that I had consistently reminded them of their debt to me, that I had monitored their autonomy in ways that crossed boundaries. Conditional love, leveraged, debt. These words felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed. But it was the second page that destroyed me. Our clients have disclosed to us, it read, that throughout their childhoods and adolescence, you repeatedly invoked their adoption status when they disobeyed you or disappointed you. Statements such as, "After everything I did for you," "You're lucky I chose you," and "I gave up my life for you," were used as tools of manipulation to ensure compliance. I sat down at the kitchen table. My legs couldn't hold me up. Had I said those things? I tried to remember. After everything I did for you. Had those words come out of my mouth? They sounded so ugly when written down by a lawyer. But in the moment, in the heat of a disagreement with a teenager, hadn't they felt true? Hadn't they been true? The letter continued. Additionally, our clients report that you conducted surveillance on them without their knowledge or consent. You hired a private investigator to track their movements and monitor their social media activity. This violated their privacy and their trust in a fundamental way. My stomach dropped. How did they know about Frank? The final page was the worst. Our clients wish to pursue no further contact with you. They request that you cease all attempts to communicate with them, their spouses, their children, or their places of employment. They are willing to obtain a restraining order if necessary. However, they are open to a financial settlement to facilitate a clean break. A financial settlement. They were offering me money to go away. I read that phrase 5 times. Then I called Thomas. "They know about the private investigator," I said without preamble. There was a long pause on the other end. "Jennifer, how much did you spend on that?" $4,800, 6 months at $800 a month. "And what exactly did this investigator report?" "Nothing, he followed them, took photos, reported what they were doing, where they were going." "Jennifer," Thomas said carefully, "that's not nothing. That's surveillance. That's the kind of thing that makes a judge take the other side very seriously." "I didn't hurt anyone. I just wanted to know what they were saying about me." "I understand. But legally, it doesn't matter what you wanted. It matters what you did. And what you did was hire someone to monitor your adult children without their knowledge or consent." I hung up the phone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in months, I let myself think about what they'd said. Conditional love. Had my love been conditional? When Michael came home with a B on his report card in 9th grade, had I made him feel like he'd failed me? When Ashley decided to take a gap year after high school instead of going straight to college, had I guilt-tripped her into changing her mind? I couldn't remember specific moments, but I also couldn't say they were lying. In December, I received their financial offer. It came through Thomas's office. They were offering me $50,000. $50,000 to disappear from their lives. I stared at the number. 50,000. That was less than I'd spent on their childhoods, less than what I'd set aside for their college funds, less than what I'd invested in therapy for Michael's nightmares and Ashley's anxiety. It was a pittance. It was an insult. But it was also a choice. That's when I did something I'd been avoiding for months. I called Dr. Morrison, my therapist, and asked if she could see me. She had an opening on a Thursday afternoon. I sat in her office again, in the same beige room with the box of tissues, and I told her everything. The private investigator, the letter, the offer, the things I'd said to my children over the years that I suddenly couldn't remember, but couldn't deny. I think I need to know, I told her, if I was a bad mother. Dr. Morrison took off her reading glasses and set them on her lap. Jennifer, I think you need to know something different. I think you need to know that love and harm aren't mutually exclusive. You can love someone deeply and still hurt them. You can sacrifice for someone and still damage them. These things can all be true at the same time. So I was a bad mother. I didn't say that. I said you were a human mother, a flawed one, like all of us. The question isn't whether you were bad or good. The question is whether you're willing to see the ways you caused harm, even though you didn't mean to. I thought about the private investigator. I thought about the emails I'd sent after Ashley asked for space. I thought about the way I'd positioned myself as the hero of their story, when maybe they'd needed me to be something else entirely. A guide, maybe. A supporter. Not a savior. What do I do? I asked. You apologize, Dr. Morrison said. Not to get them back, not to change their minds, but because you're sorry. Because you hurt people you loved, and that matters. So in January 2022, I wrote a letter. Not through a lawyer, not to demand anything. Just a letter, handwritten, to both of them. To Michael, I wrote, I'm sorry for using your adoption against you. I'm sorry for making you feel like you owed me your loyalty or your gratitude. I'm sorry for the ways I tried to control your life, even when I told myself it was because I loved you. You didn't ask to be adopted, and you shouldn't have had to spend your life repaying me for choosing you. That was never your debt to pay. To Ashley, I wrote, I'm sorry for invading your privacy. I'm sorry for hiring someone to follow you. I'm sorry for not respecting your boundaries when you asked for space. I'm sorry for the conditional nature of my love, for making you feel like you had to be perfect to deserve being my daughter. You already deserved it. You deserved it from the moment I met you on that bench. I didn't ask them to respond. I didn't ask them to forgive me. I just apologized, and I meant it. I mailed the letters and waited. 3 weeks passed, then 4, then 5. No response. In March, I received another letter from Sandra Whitmore's office. It was brief. Our clients acknowledge receipt of your letters. They appreciate your apology, but they are not ready to resume contact at this time. The offer of $50,000 remains on the table if you wish to accept it. I stared at that letter for a long time. Not ready. That meant maybe someday. It meant the door wasn't permanently closed. It meant there was a version of the future where they might want me in their lives again, even if it wasn't this year, or next year, or the year after that. I accepted the settlement. I don't know if they ever cashed the check. I never heard. What I did know was that the money had to mean something other than the price of my absence. So I donated $40,000 of it to a nonprofit that supported foster children aging out of the system. Kids like Michael and Ashley had been. Kids who'd been through trauma and needed someone to choose them. I kept $10,000 for myself because Dr. Morrison said I needed to stop martyring myself on the altar of motherhood. Sophia turned 4 in the spring of 2022. I didn't send a birthday present. I didn't call. I didn't try to contact Michael. I'd learned, finally, what it meant to let go. But I did something else. I started volunteering with a local adoption support organization. Not to get close to my own children, I understood that was over. But because I understood something now that I hadn't before. The adoption wasn't just about me choosing them. It was about them learning to choose themselves, to define themselves outside of the story I'd written for them. I worked with prospective adoptive parents, helping them understand what it meant to raise a child who'd experienced loss. I told them about the importance of boundaries, about letting their kids grieve, about not making their children's gratitude a condition of their love. I told them about my mistakes so they wouldn't make the same ones. One day in June, almost a year after I'd accepted the settlement, I got a text from an unknown number. The message was short. "Hi, Mom, it's Michael. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I wanted you to know that I read your letter. I'm working through some things with my therapist. I just wanted you to know that I got it." I stared at that text for 3 hours. I didn't respond. I just saved it. I put my phone down and I sat in my living room, in the house I'd bought for a family that no longer existed in the shape I'd imagined, and I cried. Not because I thought we'd be okay. Not because I thought this meant reconciliation was coming, but because my son had chosen to send me that message. He'd chosen to tell me he was working through things, and maybe, someday, that would be enough. I'm 58 now. Michael is 31. Ashley is 30. They have their lives. I have mine. I still work, though I've cut back to part-time. I volunteer twice a week. I see Dr. Morrison every other week. I've learned that love and loss can exist in the same space, that you can be both grateful for what you had and grieving for what you lost. I don't know if Michael and Ashley will ever want me back in their lives. I know I can't make that happen, and I've finally made peace with that. What I do know is that I was their mother. I chose them, and they chose, eventually, to define themselves outside of that choice. And maybe that's the greatest gift I could have given them, not my sacrifice, but my acceptance of their right to be separate from me. The dinosaur posters are still on the wall in their old bedroom. I haven't taken them down. Maybe someday someone else will sleep under those stars. Or maybe they'll stay there forever. A monument to a version of motherhood that I thought I understood, but didn't. Either way, I've learned that the story of our lives isn't written by one person. It's written by everyone involved, and sometimes the versions don't match up. And that's okay. That's life. That's love. And maybe that's enough.